Hello, everyone. Welcome to another office hour. I am Dr. Claire Moon, and we're going to be talking about astrology for about an hour, give or take. So, whatever questions you might have, pop them in the chat. There's a chat on the right-hand side of your screen. Any comments that you have, or if you feel like sharing anything, this is the time to do it. I'm going to be much more on top of that than I am during my usual forecast. Um, I don't know if I have any announcements. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you're interested in keeping up with me. I do have a website, www.aligninglightastrology.com. I have a newsletter. Yeah, my audio settings are correct. Right now, I've got a discount code for all birth chart readings, and it's root. R as in rainbow, OOT as in tango. And that'll get you, I think I did 10 or 15% off on all my birth chart readings. So that's what's going on with me. I'm still doing readings all the time. So book whenever if you like how I talk about stuff. I also do mentoring and tutoring. That's probably more relevant to right now. So if you are an astrology student, if you want to get more into the weeds, I am happy to do that with you. I am more versed in Hellenistic astrology technique versus like there are some things with medieval I'm picking up, but I don't know like I keep getting questions about the length of life technique, which is awesome, as a thing that exists out there. I am not a powerful enough yet wizard or a powerful wizard yet enough to do that. And so there are some things, for instance, that I don't know and I will tell you. But for the average bear, I am perfectly capable of doing a tutoring. So that's on my website as well. And sometimes I do discounts for that too. So you can, last little thing, you can follow up with all of this too by signing up with my newsletter on the website. I do have a newsletter sign up. It's a once a month free thing. I just do kind of a one-stop shop if I've written horoscopes, all these things that I do. I just put links to them in one place and send them to you. So if I do, sometimes I'll do writing, but I haven't been lately. Okay. So it's time for question and response time. And I have some backlog of stuff. I do have one question from someone. Healthy Living asked about rituals or remediatory practices to do with certain astrological transits. So I will discuss that in just a minute. But again, if anyone shows up, feel free to put questions in the chat. And if you're catching this later, you can also, if you have a question you want me to cover next month, which is always the second Thursday of the month at 7 p.m. Central Time, um, put it in the comments below and I will circle back around it for next month. Now, you do not need to be present for me to respond to a question. So just, if you totally do not have to participate in real time. I know that time zones exist and some of us have jobs where we have to be in different places that we can't do this. So no worries. Um, I think that's it. I have my emotional support beverages. I have my chart, and I think that covers it. Hello, Kai. Good evening. Nice to see you again. Um, so we're in eclipse territory, and it's really funny that someone asked me about what I do for different things. Let me actually get the question up properly. Um, the question was, uh, the rituals you do, are they some form of remediation for how the transits are going to affect your chart or major mundane events? If so, can you share about it? So asking me, what rituals I do, if any, for to deal with the current astrology. And if I do, are they remediatory based on my own personal chart? So I'll give you the short answer. Yeah, I do stuff. Is it personalized to my chart? Yeah, it is. Um, it helps me, my own chart helps me to prioritize essentially. So, let's say if you've got something in Virgo and there's an eclipse happening in Virgo right now, you might be more apt to want to do something to just take care of yourself extra during this eclipse, whether it's magically or mundanely, just like normal stuff, like, the food that you make or, um, just how you take care of yourself. It might be more of a priority versus someone who like doesn't have a lot of natal placements in Virgo. Maybe it's not a super active area of your chart or life. Maybe you're not in a Mercury profection year or a Virgo profection year. Maybe, if there's nothing like that going on, then, I don't know if I would put too much energy into remediating this type of eclipse happening in Virgo. So that's one way of thinking about it in terms of individualizing what you're doing to your birth chart, to what is in your natal chart. Um, I guess, in theory, it would make sense, like, say I have a sun that is challenged. It's in the 12th in Capricorn. And so maybe during like, solar eclipses where the light of the sun is being interrupted and the sun is struggling or something, maybe during those difficult solar moments in the sky in real time, and knowing in my birth chart I've got a difficult solar situation, then again, maybe I would prioritize that type of transit, and again, do more ritual or um, just self-care, I guess, in general around those times. The details of what I do, it varies. It's so many different things. It probably is different for every event based on based on what is going on in the sky. Like right now, Venus is really struggling. So I'm doing everything in my kind of mundane, regular life power to be supportive for Venus type things. Keep an extra like set of eyes, an extra amount of awareness on Venus topics when I know Venus is struggling in the sky. Um, I guess one other thing with that is like when a planet is struggling in the sky in the transits, I am a little bit more careful about how I use materia associated with that planet. I'm not sure if my understanding is correct on this, but so someone can absolutely chime in, if you've got different understandings of this. But it's like if I'm going to uh, use some kind of magic materia, like something from Sphere and Sundry, to draw on the energies of that planet, to call for that planet's help, to embody that planet. If that planet is in a certain situation, that's kind of what you're tapping into at any given moment. So like right now, if I slather myself with all my Venus materia, am I tapping into Venus and Aries retrograde right now? So I think about that, and that doesn't always mean that I don't do it. Sometimes I proceed and go ahead and use that, and like use that materia or tap into those planets' energies. Um, but I am giving it a second thought about what I'm tapping into. So that those are all some considerations. But like for instance, some usual standbys for me personally, the good old salt bath. I mean, if you've got the luxury of a bathtub, holy cow. Um, and this comes directly from Caitlin Kopic, but she says if you don't have a tub, you like a bathtub, you can get a wash basin, like a bigger bowl of some kind, and you can mix up some magical waters, some blessed waters, and then use that to like dump all over yourself. So I really, as like, maybe it's because I have a water moon, I really, really love a good bathing experience. Um, I guess, and if I take that same kind of elemental thing further, maybe if you're an air sign, maybe if you've got an air moon, smoke paths. Maybe smoke baths are your thing. Or if you're an earth moon, also maybe smoke baths. It's all very dry. Those are like dry bathing techniques. Forest bathing, putting your feet on the ground, stuff like that. Uh, those might be more energy cleansing or energy grounding things that might speak to people that you can use for all scenarios, like no matter what the weather is. It doesn't matter. I'm always taking a bath. I have done so many of my great works from my office bathtub, my bathtub office. And let's see, I think other standbys, um, besides, I mean, the power of salt in general for eclipses. Something that I've usually done is black salt around my home, around the foundation of my home. I might put some in a bowl somewhere as an offering or as just a ward or a sink for negative energy. I have run out of black salt, so I did not do that this time. I actually looked up recipes online, and there's like all kinds of different recipes for it. I was way too lazy, so I didn't do any of that. Um, I cooked up some rice for an offering. That's a solid one. If you're offering anything to a deity or a god, deities, they all have their specific offerings that they like. It's all pretty Googleable. I think the intention is so important. We might not be doing it exactly right at the exactly right time, or it might not be the exactly right rice, but I think if our like heart is in it, that counts for something. So I do a lot of that in terms of how to match like, is it a south node eclipse, a north node eclipse? My final little just random thought about rituals with the sky. I don't do a lot of lunar stuff, but which I know is a standby for like a lot of, I mean, witches, but also just a lot of spiritual practitioners, which makes sense because it's the moon. I need not explain further. But I will say, if you are a member of the Sphere and Sundry community online on that website, you have access to Caitlin Kopic's notes on what to do with the South Node or North Node eclipse. I highly recommend it. Even if you're not a member, I recommend membership with them so that you can read these documents. I will put a link to that page, which you're going to run into a paywall, but it's by design, which they explain. So yeah, I really love Caitlin Kopic's instruction on how to navigate an eclipse. And that's my standby for that. Hello, Astro. Welcome. Oh my gosh. Long time listener, first time caller. Welcome. Yeah, that's my kind of brain dump about rituals and what I do. I do quite a bit, honestly. I'm usually looking at, what way can I tap into a planet's energy at any given time? Or, depending on where the moon is, I might use that similarly. So like on Venus's day on Friday, or when the moon is at a Venus ruled sign like Taurus or Libra, I might wear green or, doll myself up a little bit, take a shower. I clean. Venus loves cleaning. So we clean. Like on Wednesdays, I attune myself by wearing patterns, wearing orange and green, or like orange mixed with stuff. I feel like that's very Mercury. I don't know. I feel like orange that might come from the Picatrix. I don't know. I might be making that up. Um, and like play music on a Wednesday, Mercury, do all my emails, do all my little communications. So I think there's a lot of ways of just kind of aligning yourself with the certain archetypes as it arises weekly, monthly with the moon. All of that is rad. So just some ideas. Do I even need? I do actually maybe need the chart for my next topic, but my next topic is actually, it's definitely Buddhist. It's not astrological per se, but I am going to tie it to the astrology. And this comes partially from, I'm avenging myself because during a consult the other week, I tried to explain this to a client and I did an okay enough job, but I could have done a better job. And I forgot to say like a really key thing about it. I still think what I said was fine enough and it got the point across, but I figured why not just share it with everyone and avenge myself and explain it and give it proper due. And this ties in a bit, this set of concepts I'm about to get into. It ties in with how we respond to the burden of foreknowledge, how we respond to the burden of knowing astrology. This is also a response to um, Saturn and Neptune and their conjunction coming up, because I think we're going to be feeling one part of this duality pair, especially. So the duality pair is Samvega and Pasada. And I should have linked it already but I forgot. So after this, I'm gonna link to my favorite re response, and this is partly where I learned this from was from Bhikkhu Thanissaro. And Thanissaro, he'll talk about it very eloquently. So I'll put that here afterwards. But Samvega and Pasada, these are words from the Pali language, which was more of the lay person language during the time of the Buddha in India, versus like we think of Sanskrit. For instance, the word dharma is Sanskrit, Dhamma is Pali. And so Samvega and Pasada are these words in Pali that mean, and there's no direct English translation, of course, that doesn't do justice, but some of the phrasing in the words, and this is where I think about Saturn and Neptune coming together. Samvega, the terror, the horror, the hopelessness of seeing a difficulty, like a big difficulty, and knowing how much work it's going to take to overcome. They talk about it in terms of the seeing like the difficulty of being incarnate in a body in samsara, dealing with greed and hatred and desire and all these things. And it's like very difficult. And then you find out like, oh, what if there's multiple lives? And then I have to do this again and again and again. Are you kidding me? Get me off this ride. Oh, but if I want to get off this ride, I've got to do this amazing amount of work over lifetimes. Fine. So it's very, very Samvega, the heaviness, the weight. When I think about like recently, something that's been coming up a lot for me is the terror and just the just, suffering around homelessness, houselessness and the amount of suffering out there and the amount of effort that needs to be done to change the minds of some political people right now. And it feels really terrible and hopeless. And when you see it that way, and the idea is that if we just have that, it can lead to depression and nihilism. Then why even try? What are we doing? You know? And that feels very much like when Saturn and Neptune get together, we get pessimism, Saturn, the limitations, the difficulties, the long-term problems, and then Neptune making that boundless, Neptune making that endless, just, you know, and our imagination going wild at all of the terribleness, you know, that's there, that could get worse if, you know, we continue on this way. Samvega, it feels very bad. It doesn't feel good. Um, on the other side of this duality pair, Pasada, which is the hope, the faith that there's a way out, that it's going to be okay. Now, that's much more simpler to describe. Just this light, reassuring, um, buoyant, you know, very Jupiterian faith that we're going to get through, that there's a way to deal with this that makes it manageable somehow. Now, if we only have that and there's too much of that, and this is the part I left out that was important to say, if we only have Pasada, that breeds complacency. Oh, it's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. So the idea is we need both of them. We need to see the horrors, but not get too into that we lose sight of the faith and the hope that there are ways to make this change in these piecewise ways. Um, yeah, and we don't want to go to the other side too much either and lose sight of the terror and the difficulties that are really there. So, as Saturn, my astrological kind of tie-in with this is that Saturn coming in with Neptune, and this is really going to be strong over the next year. So in 2025, and then as we get into 2026, why am I going by the day? As we get into 2026, we're going to see Saturn finally pull away from Neptune. And then I think, you know, as they get away from Neptune, so already by mid 2026, we're getting like 7 degrees away, 8 degrees away. That clarity, that realism is going to get a little better, and there's going to be less of that kind of overabundance of pessimism or, you know, just our imaginations getting carried away with catastrophizing. Um, so I've been noticing, and personally, This has been, Saturn, Neptune. They look really far apart in my software here, but they're 7 degrees within each other, or they're within 7 degrees of each other. So they're pretty darn close, and they're both over my moon. So I feel like my moon is like a little barometer right now for how this is feeling. It doesn't feel great to me, at least. I'm sure the rest of my chart changes that, so I'm projecting, but I've been noticing more Samvega. And I have a feeling that I am not the only one, even if you don't have a Pisces moon. I think people are going to be feeling the Samvega, and we need to remember the Pasada and do actions, you know? So, okay, that's that. If anyone has any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'm gonna pick my next thing. And of course, if y'all have any questions about general astrology stuff, let me know. Um, Hello, everyone. Oh yeah, one more note. Gosh darn, I've been on ritual. I have been doing things prematurely. So right now, Mercury is slowing down in Aries, and I mean, they're at the degree where they're going to station in about a day, 2 days on the 15th. Let me check myself. Yeah, on the 15th, in the wee hours, at least in Central Time, they're going to be stationing. But right now, they're slowing down. They're very slow. So Mercury things, thinking, planning, detail-oriented stuff, it's getting potentially, more in our face in some ways, but in some ways less effective. And I feel like I've been less effective. And it's like with my communicating, with my thinking, with my planning, I'm like, I feel like Mercury's slowing down. It feels like that, which is kind of funny because it's in a fast sign. It's in Aries, which is they're fast, or it is fast. It's a fast place. And what I've been noticing is I keep making mistakes about Mercury things, and I keep showing up early, like thinking something is happening a week before it's happening, an hour before it's happening. Last night I did all my eclipse stuff because I was a day off. So now I got to do it again tonight. So that's annoying. I kind of wanted it to be one and done. It's not going to be. Um, yeah. So it's funny. It's like, how is it getting dysfunctional? By going too fast, by being premature, which sometimes Aries can do. They're a lot of times the first to do something. They are fast. They have a ton of initiative, the Aries people. I'm dating one, and I love his initiative. He just thinks of something and then he's like, let's do it. And I'm like, what? I need a nap first. I'm Pisces moon. But that speed is really helpful in like a crisis. Like there are times when we have to be fast, but it can also sometimes be too fast. So I've been seeing that. That's fun. Uh, but yeah, all my ritual stuff. I made some black rice for Ketu, and now I gotta make more. It's like putting out cookies for Santa, and I did it at the wrong time. So I gotta go do it again. All right. Womp womp. Hello, Sparkles of Gold. I've got all Satya Astrology. And Kai is also an astrologer. There are so many astrologers in the chat right now. Hello, welcome. It's good to see you. I hope you're well as well. Yeah, very retrograde time. And yeah, Kai makes a good point too that daylight savings time has been happening, which we know. I mean, there are studies about this that there are more car accidents within like 2 weeks on either or after the change. It's like, yeah, we get a little fuzzled. Um, okay, let me see what. Ooh, someone has black rice. This is where it's really handy to be part of that Sphere and Sundry network because that's where I get this from, is from Caitlin Kopic. So I don't want to like plagiarize work that is behind a wall on purpose. But I bet it's Googleable. And honestly, you just offer it. You offer it. Google South Node eclipse, Google Ketu, Google those are your search terms. and I guarantee something will come up. I think it's a really like common offering. Um, yeah, good luck. All right, let's see what my next point of business was. So, oh, I did want to update us, and trigger warning, content warning, death and end of life topics, but I'm just going to circle back around to something that's come up in my forecasts and something that came up in my last question and response. And it was that whole thing where I was watching Mercury move through the beams of the sun. And my original question had been, or my original prediction had been that when Mercury was in their own bound at the beginning of Aquarius, that they would be protected from the beams of the sun, and we would have like this little pocket or window of time to do mercurial things and have a better, potentially better luck with it when the surrounding weather is generally not great for Mercury stuff. So that was my prediction. Then we started hearing, at least in America, which the birth chart for the United States, if we're using the Sibley chart, this is their third house, and Leo is the US's ninth house. But um, the news was going off with all these plane accidents, all these plane crashes. And I was like, well, that doesn't sound like Mercury is protected by the beams of the sun by their bound, or protected from the beams by their bound. That doesn't seem like it's been very effective. Now, one confounding variable is that the United States' ninth house of longer distance travel, the sun in charge of that, they're also in detriment at this time in January and into February. But a lot of these plane accidents were really domestic and short little things between point A and point B that were not that far apart. That feels pretty third housey to me. So, all to say, I was questioning myself. I was like, I don't think that the bound protecting a planet, which, I mean, and we got to understand too that sometimes, especially these bound thingies, they were used or maybe meant for very specific purposes, like maybe to be used just with the length of life technique, or meant to be used like with the circumambulation of the bounds or whatever, like the continuous perfections. And maybe I'm not supposed to be using the bounds in this way with regular transits. I don't know. But anyway, some pretty gnarly, like very deathy, fatal accidents happening as Mercury was moving into the sun. And then interestingly, Mercury went through the sun, did their cazimi, and then we got more plane crashes. So on the 17th of February and the 27th of February. And of course, like condolences to all of the poor people who have lost people to these things. Like it's just been so bizarre that, but then too, last night I Googled like if you could find a record of plane accidents in the United States. And there were so many. Like you can look it up. There's a record. I forget what government website it's on, but it's like public knowledge, or maybe people have to voluntarily report. I'm not sure. But to be fair, there were a ton of incidences with aircrafts, like even beyond these dates that I'm going to be talking about or that I've talked about in the past. But I'm going off of the aircraft incidences that were in the news. So these are all just ones that were in the news. All to say there are things that have not been in the news. So I don't want to give like a false positive here, but interestingly, all right, on the 17th, we've got, don't mean to circle the moon. On the 17th, we've got Mercury now on the other side of the sun. They're in Pisces. They've, usually we would dock them some of their imaginary space points. They get them back because of this mutual reception with Jupiter. Uh, and in any event, when a planet is going away from the sun, it's in better shape, that it's getting healthier and healthier and healthier than when it's going into the sun. And so here I expect Mercury to be improving in condition compared to what it's been previous to this. Uh, and what we did see is that there was another incident, but there were no deaths. So that was a change. There was another one on the 27th. Same thing. There was another big incident. Now we can see Mercury safely away, like at that 15, that conventional, but we know it's not like super real, 15-degree thing away from the sun. Mercury's out of the beams. And they're not in the best condition here still. They're with Rahu. That doesn't help. There's another incident, no deaths though. So that fits. I mean that did fit with, knowing that a planet's condition moving away from the sun is going to be better than when it's moving into the sun. But I wanted to share those extra February points that came in after my last Q&A or after my last forecast because yeah, it was just more of that. Let me see if there's any questions in the chat. And thank you for listening. Heavy discussion concluded. All right. Aaron asks, tips for giving your first paid astrology reading. Very nervous, but excited. Yeah, we can talk about it. So I guess maybe I should just I'll share what I did and take what helps, leave the rest. I started with friends. I did not start with family. That person, some people are going to be fine with that. That's like what they do. It really highly depends on your family member. But I personally, I was like, nope, not touching that with a 10-foot pole. But I did start reading for my friends and I did it. I just asked for like, it was basically donation based, suggested donation, $20. And that was, I mean, that's like, just to be frank, that's not appropriate compensation for a, a somewhat reasonable astrology session. $20 is not even close, but especially for a first reading, it can be that energy exchange to show that, I don't know how to say it, but um, the client tends to take, like your friend in this case is going to take things a little bit more seriously. You're going to take it a little bit more seriously. Um, and with that, I think it creates more of a sacred container where there's been an agreement and an exchange of some kind. And then it starts to go both ways instead of just one way. So I like that. Asking for something in payment is great. And also bartering is totally acceptable. We do not have to be under the rule of like only the dollar counts. If you want to barter, that's fine. That's an energy exchange as well. Whatever you feel like has value, something that has value to you. Um, I always start off kind of the same way. I've started calling it recently my flight attendant speech that I give before my sessions. And I actually have a resource. Let me pull it up here. And I have some student resources on my website. But I've got my chart workup template, like um, what I use to guide myself when I'm prepping for a reading. And it's not that I do like there's a ton of items on there. I don't do that for every single reading. They're just there so that I don't forget something important. So you can look at that too. That I also have some points about things that I talk to people about at the beginning of the session, like feel free to share as much or as little as you're comfortable sharing. We can change the topic at any time. If we start talking about something you don't want to continue to talk about, we can always change the topic. Like really setting up this expectation that you are not there to just tell them about themselves. This is a discussion where they also have autonomy and authority. I'll say that they know them best. They know themselves best. I can think of a billion ways that a Pisces moon can come out. It's much easier, quicker, more accurate to ask them pointed questions about those house topics. So do whatever setup you need to do, don't make it too crazy. You don't have to over explain yourself. But I like to make sure that, in this kind of querent oracle, reader, ready kind of relationship, there can be some weird power dynamic-y things that happen. So I like to set up that space a bit. Um, I can also put a link. I did a podcast appearance and I talked a lot about agency and setting up agency in the space because it really depends on who the person is. Some people want you to like decide things about their life for them and it's like, no, I can't do that. I don't know you. And then like I guess the other big piece of advice I have for first readings is like you don't have to do that much. Honestly, this is advice that I can continue to give myself is to keep it simple. When I got my first astrology reading, I knew a little bit, but not much at all. I didn't really understand my moon sign. And someone talked to me about what it's like to have a water moon. And it like blew my mind. All they had to do was say basic shit about Pisces. They had to say basic stuff about a Pisces moon that like any first year knows. So, and it blew my mind. And it spurred me on to make a huge change in my life, which was allowing myself to cry. I got cosmic permission to let the waters flow with. And it like I was like 25 or something. I don't know. I was old in the grand scheme of things. Like a lot of people are finding astrology when they're so young. I found it so old. So don't feel like you need to give them some huge like, oh, you're gonna be a carpenter. Like you don't gotta do that. Um, Also like ask people stuff, if people are wondering about what might be like a good career fit. Start off by asking them what they're doing with their life. If people want you to cold read them, that sucks. I hate when that happens. It's really tough, but it needs to happen for some people. It's okay. But it really makes things quite difficult because astrology is what Richard Tarnas says, archetypally accurate. We can predict archetypes, but not like the mundane details. Um, so in any event, like having a conversation with them, like you don't have to just come up with stuff. A lot of what I do is reflect back to people like, oh, I'll just throw out a random example. You're a lawyer that works in environmental justice, just making stuff up, not a real client. Um, I can show them, oh, and you have a Libra midheaven and, you know, Jupiter and Saturn are up there. Maybe they're born in 81. I don't know. Um, so all to say, like a lot of it's reflecting back, telling people basic stuff, especially if it's their first reading or they're new to astrology. You don't have to move heaven and earth. And a lot of that stuff can be so impactful. So, um, and two, like, I guess one last thing I'll say that's kind of fun to think about. I don't know. Maybe it's just my weird 12th house fun. Um, like ask people what they want or to contemplate that, give them homework about asking what they want. Because when people come in with like should questions, which is really common, and especially for us Saturn ruled folk, it's our favorite word, should. Um, when people have should questions, I often direct it back to them in terms of what are you excited to do? Like, what are you excited to do when you wake up in the morning? What are you excited to do when you get done with work? And then we talk about that because that's such a huge thing that people just always bring up is like, am I putting my energy in the right place? Am I focusing on the right stuff? Um, a lot of times I get away from the should questions. So, okay, I'm gonna stop talking about that and see if there's any responses to my responses. Great question and good luck. You're gonna be great. You gotta do one. You gotta start. You gotta do your first one. I mean, and I'm kind of a hard ass a little bit. I'm gonna have to demonetize this. I've been swearing too much. I don't care. It's fine. The moon is with the South Node. We expect it. Um, but I'm kind of a hard ass because like I had to give an injection for the first time once. It's insane. I can't believe I had to do that for a first time. I can't believe anyone ever has to do anything with a sharp object the first time. Like, and PS astrology is 100% just another sharp object. It's a very sharp one. You got to be careful with it. But like a tattoo artist, are you kidding me? I'd be shaking. I could never do it. I'd, you know, man, being an astronaut or something, those poor astronauts that are stuck in space. Granted, this wasn't, I don't think this was their first time, but it's like, yeah, you can do it. Let's see. Just reading some comments here. Yeah, aircraft stuff is difficult to track, and it was really interesting. And I tried to look at like world news too and see like are there other accidents that just like the main outlets that I'm seeing as a American, I wanted to check for that blind spot, and it was just really remarkable that that aircraft stuff. I wasn't hearing as much news about other places, but yeah, there's a Malaysia flight. Oh, I was someone's first reading. Oh gosh. Hopefully, and I wonder too, like, man, you know, you got to start somewhere, but my process has changed so much. I mean, every year it changes. Like even from 6 months to 6 months, like because I'm in year 4 of reading, year 5 of reading for people, and it's changed so much. It's always going to be this evolving thing. So you don't have to get it to like a final form or anything. I don't know if there is one. Yeah, someone just finished 8 weeks of phlebotomy training. Are you kidding me? See, and I'm an intramuscular subcutaneous girly. Um, the idea of intravenous stuff, I don't know how you all do that. My chart says I could if I had to, but I'm very impressed by all the phlebotomists. Astro says, any advice for first year astrology students on when the right time to start reading other people's charts? I'm like so brainwashed, I think, still by our modern cultural institutions that I have this like 4 year thing stuck in my head that, oh, study astrology for 4 years and then, like a bachelor's of something. But the reality is that not everyone is the same. Not everyone takes 4 years. I'm a slow reader. Like I read slowly, and only until the last few years have I really picked up on like a lot of the speaking tools on my computer, and I've gotten faster. But I was, and I have to re-listen to stuff a lot. So, I mean, I'm on the slower end. There are people out there that are so fast, it blows me away. So, I'm not gonna say that there's like a strict 2 years, 3 years, 4 years you should be studying on your own before reading for someone. I think like one litmus test, I guess, or way of gauging that might be if you've got some helpful things you feel like, sharing with someone could be helpful. And when you like, if you try explaining it out loud to yourself in private and you can do it, go for it. Um, there's this method in teaching called, what is it now? It's a little mantra. It's learn one, do one, teach one. And it's this idea that you learn a concept, you do the concept, you practice it, you demonstrate it, and then you teach it to someone else. And that third part about teaching it to someone else really solidifies it in your own learning. And I find so many of my gaps and blind spots when I am practicing or rehearsing how to explain something when I'm by myself in my private life. Pacing around my apartment like a crazy person, muttering to myself. Um, but I catch a lot of gaps or challenges, or I'll practice explaining something, and I'll say it really not eloquently or like, oh God, I can't say that in the world. And maybe it's just my autism speaking. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. If you find yourself being able to teach someone or explain to someone or imagine what follow-up questions they might have and your ability to respond to that, that's one of the ways to check yourself before you launch into a reading session where you're holding that space for someone. Uh, I would say also a way to kind of check readiness would be, yeah, like again, it does you don't have to know like super advanced stuff, but if you think that what you have to offer could be helpful, like, that person telling me what basically having a Pisces moon meant, and that's square with Saturn and what that meant. Yeah, if you're at that level where you can offer that to people and explain it in a way that makes sense to a normal person, then you're probably ready. Um, mm, I guess last thing with that readiness check, anything could come up. It's a birth chart. It has everything. The whole life is in there, the good, bad, the ugly. I would consider what things you are comfortable talking about and what things you are not comfortable talking about yourself. So for instance, like when I started my practice, I was really uncomfortable talking about children. And people bring up their kids for sure. They just start spitting their placements at you, and you're like, oh God. Um, Now I'm much more comfortable, but for a while that was one of my boundaries, and then that changed. Um, so yeah, figure out what your own boundaries are with topics that you're comfortable addressing, ones you're not comfortable addressing, and then you can, if you know that right up front and someone's coming to you saying, hey, can you read my birth chart? I just had a divorce. And you're like, not ready to talk about divorces with people. You can head off some awkwardness later on. Let's see. Also, good luck. Thanks, Kate. I also appreciate my pragmatic approach. I'm a Capricorn, so we like when people just use whatever works. Good night, Aaron. Sweet dreams. Sleep well, sweet prince. Uh, have a good night. Yeah, health conditions. Honestly, that's a tough one for me. I got to be careful around that one. I worry. I'm such a worry wart about talking with people about health stuff for reasons you can imagine. Um, and someday I'll be ready. I want to learn all of medical astrology before I open my mouth. Although I have started to open my mouth a little bit on medical astrology, but not much. But that is actually a sticky point for me. Health stuff, yeah. Um, Kai offers that when they first started reading for strangers, they offered a coupon for feedback. And they came back with feedback, and I either paid them back some or gave them that off of the next reading. Yeah. So that's just that energy exchange. If someone's giving you that energy of um, some kind of feedback, yeah, getting something in return. Thanks for the idea. I should actually be doing that too. Um, yeah, because I've got a feedback box and it is such a gift. Feedback is a gift. Yeah, really good incentive. Thank you. That's very great. Yay, crowdsourcing. Um, so wow, that this time has just flown by. I got about 10 minutes left. Um, One little metaphor that came to mind last week that I wanted to share if anyone wants to use it or take it with them or if it lands. I thought about Scorpio being like clay, that's kind of hard, but soft enough that you can like make an impression and then that impression can stick. Because like we talk about Pisces being really impressionable because it is so flexible. It's like the mutable of the water signs. So it's going to be the most kind of influential, influenceable, perceptive or influence influenceable? What's the word I'm looking for, y'all? Uh, Impressionable though. We talk about that with Pisces a lot. It makes sense. Flexible water, mutable water. I also wonder sometimes with Scorpio, also water. So there's some inherent kind of sensing that's happening. And what influences that water and what impressions are made upon Scorpio and how do they get stuck? That is a little metaphor thing I was playing with in my mind with Scorpio, is the impression in a piece of clay. So if people feel haunted by defeats, betrayals, why am I so paranoid still? All these Scorpio questions. It's like, yeah, a little thumbprint in your clay. How do you get rid of that? Um, yeah. So I want to share that. That was a cute little thing. I have one more topic, maybe. Um, this actually, there is one thing that I could talk about that I wanted to talk about anyway. And I was inspired by someone's comment on threads online. Um, and it ties back to that question or that uh, general guidance around giving readings. And the thought that I wanted to share, like someone had asked on threads, raise your hand. I'm not going to say who it was. I get into the discourse, but they were asking, are you a sugarcoating astrologer or not? Are you an astrologer that gives it to them straight, is what my implication was, or do you sugarcoat things? And I thought about it, and actually I thought about liking it because I was like, I'm not a sugarcoating astrologer, or no, they like wanted you to call yourself off if you weren't. But then I was like, honestly though, like I'm pretty soft in my readings a lot of the time. Like I don't drop the hammer on most people. I actually try not to drop the hammer if I'm, at all doing my job well, I think. So I was like, maybe I can't, maybe I am a sugarcoating astrologer. And so I was kind of going back and forth, like, am I not? Like, am I being real? Am I being real enough with people? About the difficulties, because that's another really easy thing you can do is, look at the sect. Is it a night chart? Where's Saturn? That's going to be the hardest stuff. If it isn't a night chart, Venus is going to be the most positive parts of their life, those house topics. Um, good luck if you got to talk about this person's chart. If you're a day chart, you can very easily look at Jupiter and be like, how are those topics good? Or how are those topics going? And more times than not, they're gonna be like, that part of my life's going great. Day chart, look at Mars. Are friends hard? Are they insurmountable? Like you have insurmountable difficulties with friendships? I wouldn't say it that way, but do you have difficulties with friendships? Yeah, you got Mars in the 11th in a day chart. Congratulations. You're probably gonna have difficulties with friendships. Again, don't say congratulations. But those are things that you can do. But then back to my point. Oh my gosh, I'm going everywhere. Uh, am I a sugarcoating astrologer or not? Like I can make these pretty clear distinctions. And I was going about this back and forth for a couple days. And then I realized, like, no, it depends on what the person's coming in with, because 8 out of 10 people that come in they're going for the most negative outcome in their mind, because our minds are trained to do that as mammals. We have to survive. There are predators, and we need to look for threats. So when we're anticipating the future, people will very often lean toward the more pessimistic thing. I feel like it's my job to bring them more towards center and give them some more positive, constructive potentials to start to wrap their head around and to balance out some of that really like gnarly anticipation. Um, so, maybe I'm not like maybe I do kind of sugarcoat things, but it's only to balance out what is already like a very bitter soup, if that makes sense. Another way of thinking about it comes from Ajahn Chah, who, when he talks about like giving people advice in terms of their spiritual life, he's not giving everyone the same advice. He talks about it like if you're trying to take the middle path on a road and you see someone on the left side of the road, you're gonna try to get them more, you're gonna push them to the right. And if you see someone on the right side of the road, you're gonna push them more to the left. So then too, if people are coming in and they're like, Jupiter is going into Gemini in my eighth house or something, and they're expecting a bunch of easy, successes or, things I gotta bring them down a little bit and be like, hey, Jupiter isn't always a lottery ticket. Sometimes they liberate you from difficulties, and that sucks to have to do. Um, so, sometimes I do have to be that voice of more Saturn. Most times people do that on their own. People that are so good at, like, once they start to know enough astrology and watch transits and get worried about them, people are way good enough at doing that on their own. So yeah, I do find often I end up focusing more on some positive things, but yeah, you get the idea. Um, let's see. Some people want the hammer dropped. If and people tell me that, and I'm like, okay, you want the hammer? I'll give you the hammer. It's fine. As long as it's consensual. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that compliment. Um, yeah. People go check out Nicholas's channel, Sparkles of Gold. Um, when clients don't know their birth time, what do you focus on in a reading? Yeah, that's a great question. So, um, when people are not sure of the birth time, sometimes the discussion of rectification will come up. Sometimes it doesn't. People aren't interested in it. They just want their chart read without knowing the birth time. And rectification is that process of reverse engineering based on timing of life events, big life events, where you reverse engineer the birth time. It's expensive. Unless you find an astrologer to work pro bono with you, it can be rather expensive. But I do think if you're gonna mess with astrology enough to like start getting readings, it's kind of a good idea to try to get your chart rectified. But that is a privilege. So um, there's that whole thing. Uh, but yeah, I focus more on aspects. I focus on planets in a sign. So that kind of descript like the Pisces moon example describing my Pisces moon, that interpretation, and then my moon running into Saturn. So this square repression of my water world for so long. Um, you don't need the houses for that delineation even. Like they could have given me that same delineation without knowing my birth time, without the houses, and it still would have totally hit. So, you are losing a lot of the specificity. You have to start relying, I think, more on the general significations of the planet, like say Venus being a planet of love, Saturn being a planet of restriction or obstacles. And then looking, okay, well, if let's say Jupiter is running into Saturn in a birth chart, is there some way in their life in which they feel like they've got a lot of things that want to grow and expand, but they get limited uh, regularly, or there's obstacles. So you got to be able to read the planets and the aspects that those planets are making. And then also, I rely pretty heavily on synodic cycles. And I use this as well for when I have time birth charts too. So for instance, if someone had this birth chart or this chart as a birth chart and they had Sun and Saturn that just had their Cazimi, that's going to tell me something about that person and their relationship with Saturn versus if Saturn is opposing the Sun or in a sextile with the Sun. So that really matters, what that planet's like phase is. Are they in their waxing phase, their retrograde phase? Are they rising out of the beams? Are they setting under the beams? All of that stuff will tell a story. So, and again, this is something I use with time to birth charts, but it works with not time to birth charts, is if a planet is under the beams or not. And is that planet within a week of birth, you got a whole week of wiggle room. Is that planet, stationing? So then for Mercury, if you get a Mercury under the beams, it doesn't matter what house it's in. You can ask that person, at least earlier in your life, did you have difficulty being seen or heard? Uh, are you more private? Or, was your voice less, loud? Or sometimes they were loud, but people weren't listening. So those things are independent. Those phase relationships that planets have with the sun, the part of the synodic cycle that they're in, all of that stuff you can read without houses. But it gets tough, I think, sometimes, like for timing, you know, same thing. You're looking at transits as they're connecting with planets, using the general significators of those planets. But yeah, you're losing a lot of specificity, unfortunately. Great question. Because yeah, it's really there's a lot of people without birth times. It's very common. So we do need to know how to deal with it. What? There was a question about sun and moon rulers. Oh yeah, like looking at the planet who rules the sign of the sun or the moon. So I have a Capricorn sun. So then looking at where is that person's Saturn? Because mine's in Sag, so I'm a Sagittarius flavored Capricorn sun. Stuff like that. Yeah, like what planet rules and where are they? Because that's going to add in more flavor. Thank you. EK White. That was a great suggestion. If that's what you meant, that's what I took it as. All right. Hi, KWOW. Nice to see you. Um, I think I'll leave it there. Um, Neat. Check out my videos on Venus retrograde and Venus and Aries transits in general. I did a video just about all of the general activation of those areas in our chart, did some rising sign horoscopes. Both of those videos are still relevant. So check those out. I've got my next forecast. That's gonna be, what in the heck day did I schedule it? On the 27th, on Thursday, so in 2 weeks at 1:30 p.m. Central Time, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. I will be going over the weather for April, which will include more talk about Venus retrograde, more talk this time. I didn't talk too much about Neptune going into Aries. I will cover that more thoroughly for April. Uh, and this month, as a reminder, I'm not doing rising sign horoscopes. I'm taking a little break from those. I took a lot of breaks this month with the void of course moons. We just had our first void of course moon. It was fine, I guess. I purposely didn't do anything. I played Streets of Rage 4 and it was incredible. I went through the whole thing, me and my partner. That was actually a good Venus retrograde in Aries thing to do. Streets of Rage 4, because that is a game that I used to love. And Streets of Rage, like the thing that got me too when I was a kid that I didn't realize at the time was I think Streets of Rage, like that soundtrack is what got me into synths. Sparkles of Gold, you're into synths, aren't you? Um, like that music was so good. Now, to be fair, the music in this reboot was not as good. But I think that was one of the first times I was like, oh, I like Sawtooth Waves. What is that? So yeah, that's been a good blast from the past. Retrogrades bringing back things from the past, Venus being joyous things from the past sometimes. I think that's one of the better ways it can come out. Like we all know it can be difficult things too. Uh, but that's one of the good things. So I'm gonna I'm gonna take that. Thanks everyone. I hope you have a good 2 weeks. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Have a good rest of your day, your night, whenever you're catching this. Take care of each other. It's the eclipse I'm gonna go make some more rice and do everything again and take my special bath. Ugh, it is so about to be Mercury retrograde. Hey, thanks, Kate. That's super sweet. I'm gonna look up the Hades soundtrack. I love you guys. Oh my God. So grateful.